Do you wake up exhausted, even after sleeping all night? Do you rise in the morning with an inexplicable fatigue, a heaviness in your body, as if something had been weighing you down during the hours you were supposed to be resting? Do your plans fall apart for no apparent reason? Does your money vanish before you even have time to count it, before you've even made a bad financial decision? Does your memory grow hazy, your thoughts muddled, and your ambition evaporate like smoke in the sun, leaving you unsure if the problem is you or something else entirely? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I want you to listen to me right now, not in 5 minutes, but now, because what I am about to reveal will change the way you view your nights and, perhaps, the way you understand your entire life. My name is Samba Thiari. I live in Bafoussam, Cameroon. For 12 years of my life, between the ages of 24 and 36, I was the one inflicting exactly what you have been experiencing. With my own hands and my own rituals, I used to rob people while they slept, people perhaps just like you. People who were unaware, who had done nothing wrong, people who drifted off peacefully, believing the night was a time of refuge, only to wake up missing something, never understanding why, never able to name what had been taken from them. Today, I am free, liberated by Jesus Christ after a long and arduous process that I will tell you about. And it is precisely this freedom that compels me to speak. I should not be alive today, yet God willed that I stand here before you to reveal what no one else will tell you. 3 specific things, 3 invisible mechanisms, that we use to enter your sleep and take what belonged to you. Mechanisms I know down to the finest detail because I practiced them myself for over a decade. Before we begin, I need to tell you something important. I am going to reveal these 3 techniques in this video, but I've saved the 3rd one, the most devastating, the most insidious, the one that even some experienced occult practitioners didn't always master with such precision, for last. If you leave before then, you won't grasp the full scope of what can happen in your life, nor will you have the complete picture. So, please stay until the end. What you are about to hear will change the way you view your nights, and perhaps even your days. And if this video is already resonating with you, if something inside tells you that you need to hear this, do just one thing for me right now, hit the like button. That simple action helps me reach others who need to hear this truth. Let me tell you how I got here. I was 24 years old. I was a merchant in the Akwa district of Douala. I had built something small but solid, a business selling phones and electronic accessories. It took 3 years of hard work, sacrifice, short nights, and careful saving. I had learned the trade from scratch, observing, training, and taking calculated risks. My business was thriving, not spectacularly, perhaps, but steadily and honestly. I was proud of it. Yet, within 4 months, a man I considered a close friend, a man who knew all my suppliers, my prices, my regulars, and all my trade secrets, had taken everything. He opened his own shop just 100 meters from mine, stocking the exact same products, using the exact same pricing and layout. And, in a way I couldn't logically explain, my customers drifted over to him one by one, as if drawn by a magnet, as if there were an invisible force pulling them toward his shop. People I'd known for 2 years, people I'd extended credit to, people I'd shared tea with for years, wouldn't even look at me as they walked past my place. The rage I felt is beyond words. It was a physical sensation, a burning from within. I had wanted to work honestly in a country that makes everything difficult. I had wanted to build a life with my own hands and mind. Yet this man had stolen it all from me, without shame or remorse. He would still greet me in the street, he even had the audacity to smile. One evening, after watching my income collapse for weeks, a friend suggested I go see someone, a man known simply as the Old Man, who operated discreetly in the neighborhood I won't name. I was told he helped merchants, and that people had seen their businesses turn around after consulting him. At first, I refused. I had grown up in a God-fearing family. My mother went to church every Sunday, and my father read the Bible in the evenings. That sort of thing wasn't part of my world, but the pain was stronger than my principles. The betrayal had unlocked something inside me. A door I should never have walked through. I went to see the old man one Thursday evening, just before nightfall. I just wanted to get my customers back. I just wanted him to do something to get my business moving again. I told myself it was a one-off visit, that I wouldn't be coming back. He looked at me for a long time, without speaking, for a good minute. Then he said, "Do you want me to give you power, or do you just want a one-time favor?" I said a favor. He smiled in a way I only understood much later. He said, "With a service, the effects last for a while. With power, your life changes forever, but it belongs solely to you." I said no to the power. I just wanted to get back what was mine. But that night, something happened during the ritual. I won't describe the visual details, as they aren't relevant to your understanding. What I will tell you is that the moment the old man spoke certain words over me, I felt something enter, not my head, but something deeper than a head, a space I couldn't have named before that night. It was as if the foreign presence was settling inside me with an ease that told me it had been waiting for that invitation. And instead of fear, I felt power. A new power, clean, sharp, distinct. A power I had never known before, which, in that moment of ignorance, seemed like the solution to all my problems. By the time I got home that night, I had already changed. I didn't know it yet. Over the following weeks, my business picked up, gradually at first, then dramatically. Customers were coming back. My competitor across the street suddenly seemed less appealing to them. But something else had begun alongside all this. I was having very vivid dreams. I saw people in my sleep, people I knew and people I didn't. And in those dreams, I knew exactly how to reach them, exactly how to take something from them. I could see their lives as if I had access to a map of their inner reality. I went back to see the old man. He told me, "You are no longer a client. You are now an initiate." And he taught me. In less than 2 years, I had become one of the most active market sorcerers in Dwilla. People came to see me to get what I had learned to do, other merchants, civil servants, men and women who wanted something to happen, or not happen, in someone else's life. And I went to work. The night was my workplace, and other people's sleep was my primary resource. That is what I learned during those 12 years. That is what I am going to reveal to you now. The first thing we stole while you slept was your vital force. You need to understand something fundamental about sleep, something not taught in any school and which Western medicine cannot measure with its instruments. Sleep is not merely a period of rest for your physical body. It is also the moment when your innermost self, what some call the soul or the spirit, depending on their vocabulary, withdraws into a different realm. The protections surrounding you during the day, your conscious vigilance, your capacity for active discernment, the willpower that maintains your boundaries, all of this relaxes during sleep. And it was precisely within that relaxation that we operated. It was through that natural opening that we slipped in. Vital force is what I would call your spiritual fuel. It is that invisible yet absolutely real element that allows you to rise in the morning with energy, that gives you the drive to move forward. It provides the clarity to see where you are going, the motivation to undertake tasks, and the ability to start something and see it through to the end. This is not neurology, it is not chemistry. It is something more fundamental, and we had a very precise way of accessing it. The ritual always began at midnight, never ... before. That time is not arbitrary. In the spiritual realm where we operated, the hour of midnight corresponds to a moment of least resistance in the invisible dimension. The guardians, if you want to call them that, are less active. Access is easier. We used a mixture of specific oil and ash taken from particular plants. And the central object of the ritual was always something linked to the target, a worn garment, a recent photo, a personal item. Sometimes, for targets we didn't know personally, a full name written on a piece of cloth sufficed. A name is a gateway in itself. This isn't superstition, it is something understood experientially by those who have traveled through these dimensions. The moment we chanted the incantations over these items, at the precise hour of midnight, I could literally feel it in my physical body. I could sense something shifting in the air around me, a current, a connection forming between myself and the sleeping person, sometimes miles away, like an invisible channel opening up. What we were drawing out was invisible to the eye, yet its effects were perfectly visible in the target's life. The person would wake up tired, not just physically tired, as one might be after a restless night, but tired in an inexplicable, profound way that couldn't be remedied by coffee or extra rest, as if someone had drained an internal battery overnight. They could sleep for hours and rise exhausted, as though they hadn't slept at all, because while the physical rest had indeed occurred, the body had rested, but spiritual restoration had been intercepted. It had been taken away before reaching the person. The symptoms you may recognize in your own life, if affected, are as follows. You get enough sleep, but you are still tired. You wake up with a heaviness that the hours of the day sometimes alleviate, but which systematically returns the next morning. Your body is present in the morning, but your mind takes hours to truly begin. You have very intense dreams, sometimes dreams of combat, dreams where you run without moving forward, dreams where you are in chaotic situations unlike anything in your real life, or dreams where you are in dark and oppressive spaces. These dreams are not simply products of your unconscious. For many of them, they are traces of what actually happened during your sleep in the spiritual dimension. This draining could last for weeks, months, sometimes years if no one intervened. And the longer the duration, the deeper the theft, the more permanent the effects became on the target's behavior. After a while, people no longer had the strength to fight for their own lives. They abandoned projects halfway through, sometimes just when success was within reach. They gave up opportunities without being able to explain why. They lost ambitions they had held for years. Not because they lacked talent, intelligence, or skills, not because life didn't offer them opportunities, but because the inner resources that would have allowed them to act had been drained night after night. Like a bank account that's emptied 100 francs a night, and whose owner doesn't understand why it's always overdrawn. I remember a man, an entrepreneur from Bafoussam whom I'll call Gregoire to protect him because his real name shouldn't be mentioned here. A client had paid me to block his business competitor. Gregoire owned a transport company, a fleet of 6 vehicles, and a reputation built on 10 years of hard work. Everyone in his industry knew his name and respected him. But after 6 months of targeted nighttime attacks on him, 6 months of midnight rituals focused on his name and photo, he no longer had the strength to manage anything. He would arrive at his office in the morning and sit there, unsure where to begin. He would stare at his files, unable to open them. He would take calls and forget half of what he had been told. His employees looked at him with growing concern. His wife asked him every evening if everything was all right. A doctor had prescribed antidepressants and ordered brain scans. Everything came back normal on the scans because the problem wasn't in his brain. It was in his life force, and no medical scanner can read that. His wife wrote to me 2 years ago after she saw one of my first video testimonies. She told me in 3 simple, direct lines, "He was my husband. The man you describe, that was him. And all those years we prayed, but we didn't know what we were fighting against." Reading that message broke me in 2 ways I couldn't have foreseen. I turned off my phone, asked God for forgiveness, and knew I had to keep talking, even when it hurts to remember. Life force theft is the first technique, and now I want to tell you about the second, which touches on something even more concrete in your daily life. But first, I need to tell you something important, something that took me a while to understand after my liberation. When God set me free, the first thing I felt wasn't joy, not euphoria. It was an overwhelming guilt that gripped me for days. Dozens of faces flooded back to my memory, names, stories, lives I had damaged, lives I'll never know. And I asked myself a very specific question. Now that I know what I've done, is that enough to make amends? No, knowing isn't enough. Understanding what's happening to you is absolutely essential. That's why I'm here. But the real problem is that this training leaves its mark. Understanding that you've been robbed for years doesn't erase the open doors. It doesn't erase the patterns that have been instilled in your life. The cycles of exhaustion continue, the repeated abandonments, the chronic inability to finish what you start, the recurring financial blockages. All of this doesn't simply disappear because you've intellectually understood what happened. Evil has carved a hole, and that hole remains even after understanding. It's like a wound with a thorn. You can remove the thorn from your flesh. Removing the thorn is understanding. But if you don't treat the remaining wound, the infection continues. It deepens, it spreads, and knowing where the thorn came from doesn't stop its progression. After my liberation, I myself had to go through a serious process to close, door by door, what my 12 years of witchcraft had opened in my own life. Not a Sunday prayer, but a systematic 21-day process. Every door named, every access closed, every mandate broken. And it's this process that I wanted to share with those who need it. It's called Destroying the Mandates of Darkness. 21 days to close, door by door, what the enemy has opened in your life and in your generation. Not for someone who wants a quick, superficial prayer, for someone who is tired of suffering and wants to address the damage seriously and genuinely. And I must tell you something crucial. The same techniques I used to steal life force. These same techniques were applied by other market sorcerers to block finances, destroy marriages, seal wombs, block visas, and halt careers. This isn't a one-way attack that affects just one thing in your life. A mandate affects everything. Everywhere you try to move forward, there is resistance because the open door doesn't discriminate. Everything that passes through your life passes through this door. Brothers and sisters from Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Congo, and Senegal write to me every week to testify to how this process has changed their lives. If you're watching this video on your phone right now, the link is in the description. Click on it directly. If you are watching on a television or computer screen, scan the QR code that appears on the screen now. Point your phone at the screen. You will be taken directly to the page. Now, if you have experienced that inexplicable fatigue upon waking, those dreams of fighting or confusion during the night, that feeling of being exhausted without any apparent medical reason, that morning heaviness that returns every day, I invite you to participate in a powerful action right now. Write in the comments, "In the name of Jesus, I break every mandate that steals from me while I sleep, and I reclaim everything the enemy has taken from me." Don't miss this step. Participating in a public declaration is not symbolic. It is a real act of spiritual warfare. When you name the mandate and break it with other believers doing the same at the same time, you are waging a battle that has effects. And I can tell you it is my personal experience that when hundreds of believers participate and proclaim Jesus' victory together, these mandates are broken. So, participate now. Write in the comments, "In the name of Jesus, I break every mandate that steals from me while I sleep, and I reclaim everything the enemy has taken from me." Let us now return to the second technique, because it has an even more precise impact on your daily life. The second thing being stolen while you slept was your resources and financial blessings. I realize this might sound strange at first. How do you steal money from someone who is asleep? Let me explain exactly how this works in the spiritual realm. The money visible in your bank account is the result of an invisible reality. Your ability to create, make sound decisions, seize opportunities at the right moment, be in the right room with the right people, come up with value-generating ideas, and work productively, all of this has a spiritual dimension. That is the dimension where prosperity originates. And that is the source we were targeting, not the bank account itself. This ritual differed from the first in both structure and timing. It did not take place at midnight, instead, it was performed the moment the target fell asleep, during the transition between wakefulness and sleep, that very specific moment of transition. We had methods to estimate this time for each target. At that moment of transition, when consciousness lets go and the body slips into sleep, we would place what the elder called a jump. A jump placed on the path where blessings traveled, not on the person themselves, but on the flow of what was destined for them. Here is what that jump actually caused: the person could continue working with the same apparent energy. They might possess intact talent, genuine skills, and a solid professional reputation. But something invisible was blocking the connection between her work and the expected financial results. She was constantly spending slightly more than she earned. Opportunities would come her way only to fall apart at the last moment, sometimes for absurd reasons. Serious, seemingly reliable associates would turn into sources of trouble. Signed contracts would collapse without any logical explanation. And she couldn't understand it, because she had done everything right, she had put in the work and deserved the outcome, yet the result never came. There was something particularly diabolical about this technique. We didn't just block things, we could also redirect the blessings stolen from the target toward the client who had paid us. It wasn't merely a passive blockage, it was an active transfer. Good things meant for one person were spiritually rerouted to another address. One person grew poorer while the other grew rich on what didn't belong to them, and neither understood the mechanics of what was happening. I remember a shopkeeper in Yaoundé's Mfundi district, let's call her Clarice. A business rival in her sector had contacted and paid me to sabotage her business. Clarice sold high-quality fabrics and patterns. She was remarkably diligent. Her prices were competitive, and her merchandise was carefully selected. She had genuine relationships with her loyal customers, women who had been coming back for years. But the moment the spell was cast, her business began a slow decline. It didn't happen all at once, it was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. Regular customers vanished one by one. Goods that had been in constant demand for months suddenly stopped selling. She tried changing her strategy. She changed suppliers, lowered her prices, and prayed and fasted. Nothing worked. Everything she tried came a little too late or failed to yield the results it should have. She eventually closed her shop after 18 months. She attributed it to the general economic downturn. She thought the competition had simply intensified. She sought logical explanations, for the human mind always searches for logic. She did not know that, night after night for 18 months, a spiritual raid was being staged against her blessings, and the fruits of her labor were being diverted while she slept. Someone else was growing rich on what spiritually belonged to her, and she would never know it. She would go to her grave believing it was just bad luck. I had long since stopped thinking about Clarice, but when I stood before God after my deliverance, her face, along with others, came back to me, and I realized I could not bring about restitution through my own strength. Only God can restore what the thief has taken. Only God can restore lost years. The symptoms of financial blessings being stolen during sleep are very specific and recognizable once you know what to look for. You work hard, you toil, yet the money doesn't stick. It comes in and goes out again with a speed that defies all logic regarding your actual expenses. Opportunities that seemed absolutely certain collapse at the last moment, sometimes at the 11th hour, for reasons you cannot truly explain to anyone else. You sometimes wake up in the morning gripped by intense financial anxiety, a tightness in your chest regarding your finances, without any new event having occurred to justify such a level of worry. There is a persistent sense of lack, a feeling that something is always missing, even during periods when your income is objectively adequate. And your dreams often show you markets emptying out, deals falling through, and losses you try, but fail, to prevent. These are traces of what is playing out spiritually regarding your finances while you sleep. It is not bad luck, it is not your fault. It is not your destiny, it is a precise mechanism, and mechanisms can be broken. Now, I mentioned 3 techniques at the start of this video. We have covered 2. But before revealing the third, the one I saved for last because it is the hardest to recognize. I must tell you about the gradual effect these techniques had on me, because there is something even those who practice sorcery do not always understand at the start of their initiation. The sorcerer pays a price, too. Darkness spares no one, not even those who serve it. Over my 12 years of practice, I had amassed a form of real, tangible power. My business was thriving. I had more money than I needed. I had a reputation in certain circles. I held sway over situations. Yet, something within me was dying with every nightly ritual, something very slow and very deep. I became unable to sleep soundly myself. I would wake up at specific times, always the same times. It was as if an internal alarm kept me in a state of constant, partial alertness, even while asleep. My relationship with my wife was deteriorating. Without my being able to pinpoint why, my children seemed ill at ease, guarded in my presence. Even in moments when I tried to be present and warm with them, there was something around me, an atmosphere that those close to me felt without being able to name it. And then there was one particular night, a ritual I was performing on a specific target, that met a resistance I had never encountered before. Something was blocking. I was forcing it, and something was pushing back my efforts as if a wall had gone up between me and the target. And on that night of resistance, something changed in my room. A luminous presence, very different from anything I had ever summoned in my life, moved through the space. I can't describe it with words that would do justice to what I went through. What I can tell you is that in a split second, I saw, truly saw with absolute clarity, the reality of what I was doing, the suffering of the people I had drained, the reality of the lives I had ruined, and the reality of the deep entanglement I was in. I found myself on my bedroom floor, crying, without understanding where the tears were coming from. And in that moment, for the first time in years, a name emerged within me. I said it almost without meaning to. Jesus. But that night wasn't my complete liberation yet. It was the beginning. That will come later in my testimony, because now I must reveal a third technique, the one I promised. The third thing we stole while you slept was your thoughts and your ability to make decisions. This is the most insidious of the three, and the hardest to identify in your own life because it makes you believe that what happens comes entirely from you. It doesn't attack your body, it doesn't attack your money directly. It attacks your free will from within. It makes you a stranger to yourself. Here's exactly how it worked. During sleep, the human mind isn't inactive. It continues to process information, organize data, and unconsciously prepare for what will happen in the hours and days to come. The decisions you make in the early hours of the morning, the intuitions that guide you during the day, are often heavily influenced by what your mind has been working on while you slept. This natural process is absolutely real. We had learned to intercept it and modify it. The technique was called, in our internal vocabulary, planting. Planting a seed in the mind of a sleeping person. It wasn't mind control like in the movies. It wasn't about taking control of someone's thoughts. It was much more subtle and therefore much harder to detect. We implanted targeted confusion, a fog over a specific subject, an artificial hesitation about a particular decision, a doubt that hadn't existed before. If someone had to make a big decision the next morning, sign a contract, accept a marriage proposal, start a project, choose an important life direction, take a calculated risk that could transform their situation, we could intervene during the night to create an inner resistance to that decision. Not a logical resistance, but an emotional, irrational resistance that didn't respond to any argument. The person would wake up with new doubts, irrational fears, a sudden inability to see clearly something that had been perfectly obvious to her just the night before. She might even have spoken enthusiastically about the project to her partner before falling asleep. Then, by morning, something had changed, something she couldn't explain. And the cruelest part was that she believed it was her instinct. She thought something inside her was telling her not to move forward. She valued that hesitation. She gave it credence. She shared it with loved ones who likely told her to trust her feelings. But it wasn't her instinct. It wasn't God holding her back. It was the work we had done while she slept. Patrice is a man I remember vividly. He had an extraordinary career opportunity. A business partner in Gabon was offering him a deal that could have quintupled his income in 2 years. Patrice had analyzed the proposal for weeks. He had consulted trusted advisors. He had prayed. Everything pointed to yes. He was ready to sign. But during the 3 nights leading up to the signing, someone who wanted the partnership for himself paid me to intervene. 3 nights of specifically targeting Patrice's doubts. 3 nights spent cultivating a fog around his decision. On the morning of the signing, Patrice woke up with a sudden wave of doubt he couldn't rationalize. Absurd questions swirled in his mind. What if the partner wasn't reliable? What if the market changed? What if the timing wasn't right? He asked the Gabonese partner for more time. That partner, under pressure from his own constraints, found someone else within 48 hours. The opportunity was gone. Patrice never knew why he had hesitated that morning. He had been living with that regret for years when he wrote to me. He thought he had lacked courage. He blamed himself for a decision he had never actually made freely. The symptoms of this third technique are easily recognizable once you know them: chronic indecision regarding important matters, even when you had been resolved the day before, projects launched with enthusiasm in the evening only to be abandoned without clear reason the next morning, as if the night had erased your conviction, a growing inability to trust your own judgment on issues that matter. Doubts arise precisely when you are on the verge of acting, never during moments of inaction. And often, there is an inner voice that sounds like you, speaking with your own internal accent, yet consistently saying the opposite of what you need to do to move forward. This last technique is the one that destroys destinies in the long run. Not through major, visible catastrophes or spectacular dramas, but through a silent accumulation of acts of giving up. Each instance of backing down leads to the next. Each unmade decision paves the way for the next surrender. And after 5, 10, or 15 years, the person looks back and wonders where their life went. They cannot pinpoint a specific moment when everything shifted. They simply see that something has evaporated, that the life they had hoped for never materialized. Without a clear catastrophe, without enemies visible, just a succession of hesitations and acts of giving up that, combined, resulted in an incomplete life. What I want to reveal to you now is something I only understood after my own liberation. When I began to look back with clear eyes, I realized that these 3 techniques, the theft of vital energy, the theft of financial blessings, and the sowing of confusion in decision-making, do not operate within a single generation alone. They have an effect that spans generations when they persist long enough. Here is what I mean: when a person is subjected to these nocturnal attacks for years, something shifts in how they inhabit the world, how they view themselves, and how they envision what is possible for them. They develop unconscious defensive behaviors. They become less ambitious, not by choice, but because ambition that is repeatedly thwarted eventually comes to seem dangerous to their mind. They pass on a certain resignation to their children, a certain wariness regarding success, an invisible ceiling beyond which one must not rise. Not intentionally, and not because they are a bad parent, but because what we receive over the years eventually becomes what we project. We pass on who we have become. I have seen the trajectories of entire families altered by the work we did with just one member. The father had been our target. Yet his children were growing up in the atmosphere of a man who had lost his strength, who no longer truly believed, who gave up at the last moment. They absorbed this atmosphere as a life lesson. They grew up with their own limitations they could not attribute to a specific cause, and which their parents could not explain to them, either. This is not destiny, it is not the inescapable fate of a family or a group. These are open doors that remain open, allowing generations of attacks to pass through until they are shut. I want to tell you about a specific case so you understand what I mean by a generational effect. A man I'll call Simon had been a target for 4 years, 4 years of having his life force stolen at night, 4 years of assaults on his finances. Simon was a hard-working, honest taxi driver who had tried several times to move on to something bigger, like a small fleet or a side business, only to fail at the last moment. He didn't understand why. He prayed, he worked, he tried again. But the results never came. What I saw was how his 2 eldest sons, having grown up watching him struggle and fail, had internalized his fear of failure as an absolute truth about their family. One of them wrote to me a year ago. He told me that projects in his family never succeeded, that it was like a family curse, and asked if it was real. It was real, but it wasn't an automatic hereditary curse. It was an open door in his father's life that had never been shut, and the atmosphere it created had